Okay, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited to have my friend Leslie Satterley on the podcast today. Leslie's a family law attorney at Woodnick Law.
Yes.
You do an amazing job. You have an excellent career. I'm really excited to hear about your journey and what you do in your profession. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
So Leslie and I know each other by way of her husband, Galen. Galen and I are both addicted to golf. And so we met at a Chandler Chamber of Commerce event and then bonded over golf. And then we've gotten a chance to know you through that, which has been awesome. And
Yes.
you guys, we've worked with you guys, in a mortgage capacity. So really great to have you on the show and get to connect with you more.
Yes, for sure.
So what got you into becoming an attorney and going into family law? Like what led you down that path?
At first, it was probably my desire to be anything but a lawyer. I come from a family of lawyers. So my grandfather's a lawyer, my aunt's a lawyer, my uncle's a lawyer, and my mom's a lawyer. And
Wow.
so growing up, I knew what she did, and she was in family law. And I was adamant that that was not what I was going to do. I was going to do something completely different. I went into business school at ASU and thought that I was going to do something maybe with marketing or advertising. And I ended up taking a law and economics class. And something just hooked me in at that point. I thought that the law was then interesting, but I was absolutely not going to do family law. There's no way I was going to do that. That's what my mom did. I'm not going to do family law.
Yeah.
So I started getting interested into international law, different business courses, and I studied abroad in Geneva at the UN, and I did an internship on the Capitol Hill. And I realized in order to do that sort of thing, I would have to live in New York or Washington, D.C., and that was not my jam, being a West Coast girl.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking a family law class in law school, and again, something just drug me back in. And from that point on, I've only done family law.
That's awesome. I love that. I think that there is something like in the genetic pool that like brings generations into the same occupation. Cause I would literally say the exact same thing about the mortgage business. My dad was in the mortgage business for almost his entire career. Like growing up, I can remember, I didn't even fully understand what he did. But mortgage lending sounded like the most boring job on the face of the planet. I thought there's no way. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I won't do mortgage lending. That's the one thing I knew I wouldn't do. And then 3 months after college, I'm working for Wells Fargo slanging mortgages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's cool. What from your time like at the UN, what do you think was one of the biggest things you learned there? Or like
that the U.S. is actually not the center of the world.
We aren't?
No,
I thought the world like rotated around
I know. It was a very humbling experience to see how worldly and cultured Geneva is, and all the different viewpoints to take into account when you're thinking of different policies or laws, or the ways that you even look at the world. So it was a very interesting time to go, especially since when I went, it wasn't long after 9/11. So, there was a lot of patriotism and everything going on in America. And there was still a ton of support, no doubt, for America and what they were going through in Europe as well. But it just had a little bit more slightly worldly, well, what are all the other countries doing as well, too? And what do they have to deal with? And they have their own issues as well. And this is not just us, that's battling terrorism and everything else. So it was very interesting, very interesting. We had a professor that really pushed the limits to make us think about other cultures and worlds and poverty and everything else. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so many of us, I feel like, get trapped into our American bubble, and we don't like expand outside of that nearly as much as other countries know about us.
Yes.
We know very little about them.
Totally.
Yeah, that's cool. That's an awesome life experience. What do you like most about your field?
So I think one of the things that really drew me into family law is that in a way it is a much more personal and significant change to a person's life than any other type of law, or than many other types of law. I'll put it that way. I'm not representing a big corporation. I know my clients well, communicate with them often. I am helping them through what is very likely the worst time of their life, most challenging time of their life. They're scared. And so if there's anything you can do to bring comfort to them, to bring knowledge to them, and to help them to move on to, the next version of their life, that's why I like doing it. It also has drawbacks because it could be very emotionally draining at the same time to do that sort of thing. And that's something law school never prepared you for, is the emotional aspect and kind of counseling aspect of the profession.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard. And when I think about the mortgage business, I've been in it for 16 years, and I sometimes ask myself, like, well, why am I still in this business? What is keeping me here? And I think it's the emotional component of it, because you're helping someone at a time that's very important to them,
Right.
so it's a home purchase is an emotional purchase when it's a primary residence. So that emotion is great, when things are going well. And then it can also be challenging when things aren't going well, so there's a lot of pressure but it's interesting how the dynamic of like something being really important means you're adding a ton of value, but it also means it's very pressure packed,
Yep.
and the consequences can be big.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. And then what, how is your team? Do you have a team assisting you there? How is that set up? How has that grown over time?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we have 6 lawyers at our firm right now, and every one of them are awesome people and great attorneys as well, too. So we collaborate a lot on bigger issues or helping with cases, but we also have a great team of paralegals and legal assistants in the office as well, too. So definitely they help make everything run smoothly and good communication with clients and helping fill in whenever we need it. So I couldn't do what I do without any help. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a village to do some of these occupations that require so much work and effort and thought. So what's your, role in the life cycle of a client that you're working with? Are you for me, I do our client consultations, and I'm bringing in the business. I'm more, doing the sales and lead generation, and then I'm managing my team. There's 5 of us on my team. What points are you involved in the process, and then what does your team do?
Sure. Yeah, no, I would say that I'm involved almost from start to finish. A lot of times I will be the person who does the consultation, and then once they retain, then I am the attorney as well too. There's sometimes that cases will come in and I will help oversee them or have another attorney handle the case. But the paralegal is there helping me along the whole way as well too. And then if it needs to go to a trial, I'm the attorney who is trying the case in front of the judge as well too, and helping out with that. So it really is coordinating everything start to finish.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think for your clients, in a emotionally, kind of vulnerable and difficult place, to have you there all the way through from start to finish, it would be amazing to have. You're like their guide through that whole process.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And so, you must be really busy as an attorney. What does your morning routine look like? How do you get yourself geared up for the day? And what are some little life hacks that you have to get yourself ready for the day?
Well, I'm not a morning person. That's the first thing. And there's nothing that's going to change that. Yeah. So I like to sleep a little bit longer than probably a lot of professionals do. But I'll wake up maybe around 7 in the morning and then, just check emails a little bit, but then I'll get into a workout routine and do my workout and get ready. And then I'm usually good and ready to go at the office and sitting down hard to work around 10 or 10:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are you more of a night person then?
Totally.
Okay.
Yep.
So do you catch up on work at night, or do you have just a downtime? Are you able to shut it off and go home and relax, or?
Unfortunately, if there's something that I could do better on, it's probably shutting off work. But with family court cases, and again, how quickly they move, how emotional they are, it's hard to completely shut down. So I'm always checking on emails, and I'm always seeing if there's something that urgently needs to be responded to. But I try and by dinner time, make sure that I'm not doing anything afterwards unless there's a big deadline or something looming.
Yeah. Well, I think that's cool. I was just talking to one of my best friends about this last week, and he's a super successful commercial broker, and one of the hardest working people I know. And he was we were talking about how so many business books and stuff will tell you, oh, you got to get up early, and you got to get all this stuff done. Most successful people get up early, and that's how it has to be done. And he's like, I feel guilty because I don't get up early. He's more of a night person, and he'll do some work in the evening. And he's one of the very hardest working people I've ever met, and extremely successful. So I think it's cool. I'm glad you share that, because there's people who are morning people and night people.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just how you structure it.
Totally.
Yeah. what do you guys do to to generate clients and referrals? Like we were talking earlier before the show that most of your business is referral based. How do those referrals come in? Do you guys have a strategy for that?
So, I mean, a lot of it is just we are hoping that our work and our relationships with the clients end up speaking for itself. We get a lot of referrals from clients, repeat clients, or clients telling their friends or family or coworkers about us. We also get a lot of referrals because we bring in a lot of other professionals while we're going through the divorce.
Oh, okay.
You can imagine that in a divorce, there's a situation where there's a house sale or a refinance. And so we need to know the realtors. We need to know the mortgage brokers. There's businesses. We need to know the business attorneys, the business valuators, the forensic accountants, a whole host of different things that could pop up. Tax issues. We need to then know CPAs or tax attorneys. So we have a bunch of relationships with other professionals, and they just know that we take care of the clients and really get results. So that's where we get the very vast majority of our clients.
Okay, that's awesome. And then are you in regular communication with those people just from working cases, or is there an intentional strategy to stay in front of those people and continue relationships with them?
I would say the strategy was much more intentional pre-COVID. It would be going out to lunches and meetups and that sort of thing. And everything went a little bit by the wayside with COVID, and things are starting to pop up again. So over the past 2 years, though, it's been just staying in touch because of cases that we're working on. And hopefully it'll get back to a more personal in-person social capacity soon.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So you guys are doing an incredible job then to be just generating all that business by word of mouth. And that's how my business is as well. It's just all word of mouth referrals. We don't do any like paid advertising per se. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thinking about an average couple who's considering getting married, are there things like with your experience and what you've seen in your career that someone should take into consideration, either before or early on in marriage that could set them up for success? Or there's some things that come to mind?
So I don't know if this is anything other than anecdotal from my point of view and the way that I see things, but I think that the more couples share with each other about finances, the better. Not necessarily that you have to share bank accounts, but I've seen a lot where they have no idea really what's going on with finances when they're at the divorce point. I have no idea what's going on with finances. I don't know what bank accounts there are. I don't know how much money was made, or there's very strict budgets that are given. And it puts these parties in a role of not really being collaborative with each other, but more of individuals are at odds with each other because they're not on the same page with respect to finances.
Yeah.
So I find that to be very interesting. And one of the things that I encourage people to talk about, ironically, one of the things that we also handle are prenuptial agreements. So in a prenuptial agreement, you're required to share all finances before all information about income, because if you don't know about that, you don't know what you're potentially giving up in a prenup by saying we're not going to commingle or keep anything. We're going to keep everything separate.
Okay.
So you have to give full disclosure of that stuff in order to enter a prenup. But you don't necessarily just if you're getting married. So, I really think that being open and honest with each other about everything, including finances, is very key and important.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, and I think in my business, because we interact with people at the time of divorce as well, and that that's just a part of refinance activity. Sometimes is splitting up mortgages, and I hear that often as well, where we're talking to one or the other spouse who really had no idea what was going on with the finances. And a lot of times, just from my personal experience, it's been that there's much less in assets than they thought that there was.
Right.
Or there's significantly more debt that they didn't know was there.
Yes.
And there's things that were hidden or not discussed. And then, it's come to a head, or it's come out and it's become a huge issue.
Yep.
What do you like for Danielle and I think there tends to be like the more of the finance person in the relationship. And then, so that person kind of like handles more of the bills and that kind of thing. So like I've ended up being the finance person in our relationship.
Yep.
I pay our bills once a month, and then, allocate money and make sure everything's paid. And then I'll sit down with Danielle and we'll just review, like, here's where we're at with it, with these balances, and we paid this and that, and here's our budget for the month. And we talk about it together. Mm-hmm. So we review that together once a month. Are there any other tips or ideas that you know of for people that they could help them to keep those lines of communication open?
I mean, I think you're doing way more than a lot of people do. I think as long as each party knows that they have open access to look at things and ask questions, that's, you're ahead of the curve at that point.
Yeah.
Whether or not you sit down and jointly go over it. I think the other important thing is if you have a financial advisor, make sure both people are going and talking and seeing what they're putting together as far as, what you have now, what your goals are for the future, and what that might look like. Because I think that helps give another perspective from a third party that you guys are both having to sit down and talk and figure out what the goals are.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a great reason to have an advisor or somebody like that in place where you can have those open discussions.
Right.
Yeah, the money is like a hard thing for a lot of people to talk about. So I don't know, it's just kind of like almost taboo in our culture. So I can see how that could then penetrate a marriage where you can't talk about things. Yeah. Sure. What do you think prenuptial agreements are something that people getting into a marriage when they have significant assets in place is something that people should do? What's your advice with that?
I think it's definitely something to consider. I think there's a couple of reasons that people get into prenuptial agreements. One of them might be that there was a pre-existing business or pre-existing large amount of assets before the marriage, and they just want to protect that. Another one might be that there was a previous marriage before, the divorce maybe didn't go so well, or maybe they have children who aren't common and they just want to make sure to protect some of their premarital or even during the marriage assets for their children that aren't common with their new spouse. Another might be family influence as well, too. Maybe there's going to be a big inheritance or something coming down the pike from family that they'll be getting during the marriage, and they want to make sure that that's separate. Some people are just interested in, hey, look, we want to get married, but we don't necessarily want to deal with figuring out how to divide things later. So we're going to spell it all out in advance, and we're going to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah.
So it really depends. I think anyone should consider whether or not it's a good idea to do that or not. I mean, when my husband and I got married, we both had just oodles of student loan debt. So it's not like we were really all too interested or caring about whether or not we should keep things separate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Do you know, like how common they are? Like what percentage of marriages have a prenuptial agreement?
I don't know an actual percentage on that. I mean, I would say it's a small percentage of the cases that I end up handling. Maybe there'll be 4 or 5 total throughout a year that I handle, whereas I'm handling, I don't know, 50 to 100 cases a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Again, anecdotal. That's from my point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, do you think when people are coming together in a marriage, should they be thinking about it in the lens of, well, what would happen if we were to get a divorce? Is that, because I always go back and forth, like on the topic of a prenup, like are you setting yourself up to then think, okay, I need a plan for this to fail, so here's my exit plan, and then are you like putting the bad vibes out there that it might not work, or is that smart planning and that you should always think about, well, what are all the possible outcomes here, and then plan accordingly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough one because I often wonder, how exactly does that conversation go?
Yeah.
Where should we hold the wedding? By the way, will you sign this prenup? It's very awkward. But again, depending on what the reasons are for the prenup, I think sometimes it just makes perfect sense, and you're going to have to talk about that and need to talk about it to be open and honest about what's going to happen with certain things. Other times, if you're just thinking about, there's no real overarching reason other than you just want to make sure that you know what's going to happen when if a divorce ends up happening, then yeah, it might be awkward that you're thinking about how exactly this works. But with divorces, it's never a pleasant situation or idea. So even if the prenup makes you have a conversation about how exactly you're going to hold your funds, what you're going to do with retirement, what you're going to do if you own a house, like if one person's making money and paying for certain things and another person's maybe not making money? Is there going to be some kind of are we going to think about that right now and make sure that the person who's not working because maybe they're raising a family is going to be taken care of at the end? Maybe it might entice that person who has a degree and education to say, okay, I'll agree to stay home because I know that there's going to be some kind of spousal maintenance that we've already negotiated in here and everyone feels more comfortable about it.
Yeah.
So I think it depends what the relationship's like, whether or not you have to take it to that step of talking about a prenup versus at least just talking about the finances. You got to figure out where you fall on the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that listening to you describe that, it's communication.
Absolutely.
Talking about all of these things. And a prenup, that is like a tool to open more conversations and have more communication so everybody's on the same page.
Right.
Or we're always talking about that in our business dealing with our clients. We have to give them good communication as to what's happening in the process. Yeah. Communication is always the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what the other person is thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had mentioned the possibility of an inheritance that could be coming down the road. So that's interesting to me because that could be not even money that you have now, but it could be future money that you could potentially have. So say, for example, a couple gets together, they don't get married, they don't have a prenup. And, let's say one of the spouses or, one of the couple is going to get a large inheritance down the road. How long are they together before a common law? Is there a common law marriage where then the other spouse could potentially be entitled to some of that inheritance money if there was a separation?
So in Arizona, there's no such thing as common law marriage.
Okay.
So other states have them. So you would have to be careful depending on what state you're living in. But Arizona does not have it. So there really wouldn't be any entitlement to it. And really the presumptive law is even if you're married and one spouse gets an inheritance or a gift, something along those lines, it's that person's separate property.
Okay.
The problem is what did you do with the money after you got it? And did you do something that changed that presumption? Did you throw it into a joint bank account? Did you put it into a house and end up titling it in both your names? Because then you could have taken what was your separate property and made it community property.
Okay.
So that's where you just have to be careful with what you do with your money.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. So with no common law marriage in Arizona, then no matter how long you're together with somebody, if you're not mingling assets and then you separate, there's no entitlement to either of the spouses.
No. To either of the partners.
Either of the
partners. They were
partners.
never married. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They were never married.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Either of the partners.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know. Are there kind of taking this into almost a relationship counseling, but is there common themes you see with marriages that aren't successful? Because I feel like my wife Danielle and I have an amazing relationship. We're really close, and I think we have well above average communication, and I feel like our love is stronger now than it's ever been.
That's great.
But you come across people where they've been together for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden they're not, and it's surprising to me. And I always in the back of my head, I'm like, I want to make sure that something doesn't start to erode in our marriage where then we become one of those couples that's down the road. All of a sudden they're not together. So are there the common themes that you tend to see in divorces as it relates to people's relationships and why they don't work out, or is it all unique?
I mean, some of it might be financial stress, like you had mentioned, the hidden debt or debts maybe that are even known, but maybe it's just too much for them to handle at that point. Substance abuse ends up being one where they just can't get over that and figure out how to do that. And it gets to a breaking point.
Yeah.
Breakdown of communication in general. I see affairs a lot in divorces, but from my point of view, I don't think it's ever the affair itself that's wrecked the marriage. It's what caused it and the underlying, how did they deal with it?
Yeah.
And that's above my pay grade to really delve into and figure out.
Yeah.
I often tell my clients, look, you can talk to me as though I'm your counselor, but I'm twice as expensive and not nearly as qualified. So, figure out what you want to ask me. I'm here to answer all your legal questions.
Yeah.
Find a good counselor as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like everything just circles back to communication because it's so hard to know what other people, how other people feel, to have like true empathy for someone, I feel is almost impossible because your personality is like partly your genetics, but it's also like a summation of all of your life experiences. You've gone through all these unique things in your entire life, and that combined with your genes and how you were raised and everything creates how you feel about all different kinds of situations. So I could never know how you would feel because I've never been in your shoes.
Right.
So it's like you really have to talk about these things a lot to be able to see something from somebody else's point of view.
Yeah, but I think that, as you mentioned, even within both of our professions, it's the communication, making sure that the client knows exactly what's going on the whole time. And I know that your office has been great doing that, in that I have gone through, finding a mortgage with you.
Yeah.
But it's what's going on, what's happening, like what's the status, what's the expected timeline, like, okay, this just came in. Can you please explain this in English? Because I don't know the lingo from this document to the next. And the more I think you just let people know what's going on, the more comfortable they end up feeling. And I think that that's key within profession or in any relationship.
Yeah, that's great advice. Are there changes as it relates to family law, like, are new laws or changes to state law that people should be aware of that could impact them you think are important to discuss?
There's changes that happen yearly because we have the legislature who ends up passing new laws and statutes. And so we got to keep up on that. They revise different aspects of family law from time to time. They've just updated child support guidelines. So it just affects a little bit how you calculate what child support is due, and they change things. So it's hard to say that there's anything big that's come out recently to discuss, but it's something that as family law attorneys have to be up to date on.
Okay. How is spousal maintenance and child support calculated? Is there like some formulas for that? It just follows the formula, or how does that work?
It's a good question. One, yes, the other, no.
Okay.
So spousal maintenance is completely discretionary. There's a statute that says that you have to first qualify, and then if you qualify, the court has the ability to determine the amount and duration. So there's no calculation for that, though. So that you could give the same facts to 10 different judges and get 10 completely different answers with respect to spousal maintenance. They're really looking at how much does someone need to help shoulder the difference between what they realistically could make or have available to them and what their reasonable budget is. It's not always that clean because the person who would be asked to pay can't always pay that difference and shoulder it. When you're breaking up a household, you're losing the economies of scale. And so it's hard to make the same pool of income go in two different directions.
Yeah.
So spousal maintenance is a hard one to really tell anyone with certainty what they should expect. Child support is different. There are actually guidelines and a formula and a calculator you can even Google online where you put in income and you put in different inputs and it'll tell you what the child support amount is. There's ways to deviate from it, or there's some discrepancies with what kind of numbers you'd put into the calculation from time to time, but it's a lot more cut and dry than spousal maintenance is.
Okay. And then is child support, is it in all cases up to age 18, or like, are there cases where child support could be paid for children beyond the age of 18?
That's a good question. In Arizona, it goes until a child is emancipated, and what they consider emancipated is 18, or if they're still a senior in high school, then it will go until they graduate high school, but they can't be older than 19 at that point. So you have a whole bunch of ifs and buts, and then there is one other caveat to that. If you have a child who is disabled and will not likely ever be self-sufficient, then you could have child support extend for that disabled child. So that pops up here and there. Some other states, though, do have child support go even longer until they're 21 or otherwise. So in Arizona, if you do that, it's a completely separate agreement that you're reaching with your ex-spouse. It's nothing that a court can order or would be enforceable to cover college expenses or expenses past that emancipation.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's interesting. And then there's no formula on spousal maintenance. Yeah. I think somebody like me, it'd be hard to do. Like if Danielle and I got a divorce, it'd be hard to calculate spousal
Yep.
maintenance because my income can be swing
Yep.
huge amounts from year to year depending on what the market's doing.
Totally.
So
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why there's no specific calculation. Even with child support, though, you have to figure out what your income is. So usually they'll look at an average and determine whether or not that makes sense to use the past, 3-5 years, or what other circumstances are in play as to what it should be used. But
yeah.
the spousal maintenance is interesting with respect to an interplay with mortgages, because a lot of times we have someone who maybe hasn't been working, wants to refinance and get the mortgage out of, the spouse, soon to be ex-spouse's name, or they want to buy their own house. And so one of the things that we look at is, okay, then, your income might be spousal maintenance, and we need to make sure to get an amount that is long enough to show that you're going to have reliable income, and maybe a high enough amount for you to be able to qualify. So a lot of times there's some strategy involved with figuring out, if you are looking at getting a mortgage, what can we do to help you with respect to the spousal maintenance we're asking for?
I love that you're looking out for the mortgage people over here,
right?
Leslie. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
it's 3 years continuance.
Yes.
We have to have 3 years continuance. So from the date of when the loan closes.
Yeah.
So if that spousal maintenance was going to last for 35 months from the date of the loan closing, we can't count it.
Right.
It's got to be 36 months or more from the date of the loan closing.
Yeah.
I had a client in yesterday. We were who's going through a divorce, and she had set up a pension through her employer. This is from her employment, and she had like 3 options for how she could take her pension. It was a lump sum distribution, it was a monthly lifetime distribution, and then it was a reduced monthly lifetime distribution with survivor benefits. And so she's kind of just getting into this process, and she's now realizing that she can't, or she thinks right now that she's not going to be able to switch from the reduced lifetime benefit with survivor benefits back to the full monthly benefit without survivor benefits. Do you know, is that common with pensions? Is there like laws governing that?
Yeah, the pensions are very specific. So you would have to look at exactly what the pension is and figure out. And there's different rules whether or not you can elect something if you're already retired versus not retired, and so on and so forth. And then add a divorce in there and a qualified domestic relations order, and there's a whole nother set of issues to look at. Yeah. So the pension stuff is interesting. It's very well governed by plan documents, but it's very specific to the specific plan.
Okay. So is there like federal overarching laws or state laws that allow what pensions can do, or can you see like wide variations among pension plans just based on what the pension plan administrator set up?
Yeah, well, some of them are federally governed, like think of military pensions or things along those lines. So the state law can talk about what exactly would be considered community property, but really it's just whatever the federal statutes say as far as what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do. And then you have some private pension plans, so that could be completely different and governed by what exactly is allowed in the pension document. So then the divorce sometimes has to figure out, well, is there anything, can we do anything, to better clarify exactly what the right is to the ex-spouse, or are we stuck with what we have, and what do the state law statutes say about it? And it's a very complex area.
Okay. So, and then would you see, like, say this situation, would it ever be common to say, okay, well, instead of that survivor benefit payment going to the ex-spouse, I want it directed to my children? Can you even do that? Or if it's set up like that through a pension, do you think in most cases it's got to go to the surviving spouse?
It again depends.
Okay.
Yes.
I had another question I was going to ask you there. Oh, if someone is like considering getting a divorce from their spouse, and they're trying to figure out, like, how do I navigate this process? They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What do you think someone should do? What are their first steps to figure out how they should tackle that whole situation?
So assuming you've figured out from the emotional level that you're ready to go forward, because I would say if you haven't, go to counseling, go to marriage counseling, go to individual counseling, do some soul searching, figure out what you need to do if you're at that point. If you are wanting to look at, okay, what does this actually look like from a procedural point of view? There's a couple things that they could do. One, they could have a consultation with a lawyer and just sit down and say, this is the situation. This is what I'm thinking. What does this look like? And hopefully the attorney gives them enough information for them to decide, some of the baseline level questions that they have with respect to whether or not they want to move forward. The other thing is too, here in Arizona, the Maricopa County Superior Court has a really good self-service website. So they have instructions and forms. And so you can at least look to see like, okay, what do these documents look like? What does a petition look like? What does a final decree look like? What does a parenting plan look like? What do I need to know with respect to a parenting plan? So they can look at that. It is a one size fits all type of form. So it tries to cover everything. And at the same time, there's no way it covers everything. So it's a lot of fill in the blanks and check the boxes in those. But if that's, where you want to just kind of get a visual aspect of what things look like, that's a good place as well too. But I really do think a personal consultation with a lawyer is a good place to start, because you don't have to commit at that point, at least not with us. There's many times I sit down with people who say, I'm just exploring this as an option. I just want to get an idea of what this looks like. And I sit down with them. Yeah. It's just a consultation. And then, sometimes I never hear back from them. Sometimes I hear back from them soon. Sometimes it's 2 years later and I hear back.
Yeah. Okay. That's great advice. Well, sometimes we've had clients where it's like very difficult to get anything from one of the spouses. Like we might be doing, spouse. I guess they're spouses at that point, or ex-spouses. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with spouse A, spouse B is like, I'm not giving you anything. Could one spouse not sign divorce paperwork? Is that possible? Can they just fold their arms and say, I'm not doing it? And
it's possible to a point, but at some point the court will allow the person who wants the divorce to move forward with either getting a default decree, meaning they get to go to the court and say, this is what I wanted. I let the other person know what's going on. He got proper notice, got legal notice. He's not participating, or she. So therefore grant my divorce, and they can do that. Or, the court will just end up setting a hearing. And if the person doesn't show up, the court's going to obviously take that into account, and that would not be to their benefit. But yeah, there's definitely people who are not wanting the divorce, not emotionally ready for the divorce, just don't agree with divorce. And it's hard because you got to make sure that person either has legal notice enough to be able to move forward, even if they're not participating, or wait until they come around so that you can do something and be effective with coming to agreements and working on things such as mortgages or otherwise, where you really kind of need both people to participate rather than go to the court and ask the court for an order compelling them to do something.
Yeah. We've had some challenges at times where, a lot of times it's once a divorce has been finalized, but there's a joint debt that we've got to get into one person's name for the other to be able to qualify, and one doesn't want to play ball, and it's very, very difficult to get it done at that point. I don't want to get in the middle of it. Like, you guys got to figure this out. Let me help how I can, but I'm scared and I don't want to. I got to be careful here. What's your biggest struggle at work, and how do you overcome it? Like, what are your hardest situations, and what are some of your tactics to get through challenging or stressful times at the office?
So I think there's a couple different levels. One is just workload and figuring out how to manage workload and make sure that the clients are all getting the attention that they need and nothing's getting missed. So with that just falls down on organization and trying to keep up a running list of things that have to get done and deadlines, and staying on top of it and asking my paralegals to stay on top of it. So I'm very detail oriented with that. So I might get stressed about the amount of stuff, but I feel like I'm never missing stuff. There will never be a deadline that's missed. The other one, it really is, I touched upon it a little bit earlier. It's just the emotional aspect of family court cases. I mean, there's some really tough stories, some really tough experiences that clients are going through. And it can be very tough emotionally when there's little or not much that could be done, or it might be difficult if the court makes a decision that maybe we thought was not correct, maybe was more detrimental than we wanted it to be, or, just trying to walk into a situation that's really bad and figure out what's the plan to get them out of it.
Yeah.
So that emotional aspect could be hard. And I think with that plays into a little bit of can you turn it off? Can you get some alone time for yourself? Again, not a morning person, but I make sure to take mornings kind of like my time, so that I can make sure that I'm ready to go and kind of clear-headed with everything when I get to the office.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, everybody has like different challenges and stressful things that they go through in their life. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. And I think that people that are able to like find the most happiness are able to move on from those things. They're able to figure out a way to deal with it and then move on, and move mm-hmm. forward. So is there anything specific you do? Like if you've had one of those challenging experiences to move forward, like kind of a reset, like a meditation or, writing it down or something like that helps you to kind of get some closure in your mind and then move forward?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely tend more towards the active, whether it's a run or a yoga or a workout sort of thing, that helps a lot. But I think also it's very, very important to have a good group of friends that you can rely on and just, hey man, I've had a tough day. Like, can we just go to dinner? Can we just chat and do something, completely different to like decompress a little bit. And so I think that that's very important.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm someone who has a very active mind. Like my mind's always going 3,000 miles an hour and I can't turn it off. And so it'll wander and like I'll worry about things that aren't even happening, like things that could happen.
Yeah.
And then I can do it so much that I can like cause anxiety for myself. And then it can actually turn into like physical symptoms of anxiety. And so I've had to learn over the years to catch myself when I'm going through those modes of thought and then redirect myself somewhere else, get my brain going from here over to here.
Right.
And then you can feel the physical difference in your body when you do this. So I love that, like getting together with your friends and just getting your mind onto something else as a way to move on.
Yeah.
Because these things happen, tough things happen to everybody. But time moves on and you have to figure out a way to move on. Otherwise, you're just kind of paralyzed and drowning in your sorrows.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Final question for you, Leslie.
Yes.
What do you wish you had known 10 years ago? Like, what do you know today that you wish you'd known 10 years ago?
That's a good question. I think it's to say that no one really ever knows everything. When you're younger and you're starting out, you're like, like these other people, they know totally what they're doing. They've got it all figured out. Like it's all good. And now 10 years later, I'm like, no, I still don't have everything figured out. And I don't think I will. And I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm okay with acknowledging that now because I know I can go to other people, other professionals and, collaborate and get help. And that really makes it better anyway, rather than pretend you've got it all figured out. No, like accept help. Yeah. And help is good and it's totally fine and you should.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's like and people, if they sense that from you, they're feeling like transparency and honesty when they're dealing with you. If you're able to say, okay, I'm not sure on that, or I haven't come across that. Let me find out how we could deal with that. Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think for me too, kind of similar. Like for a long time, I felt like in my career, I just had to figure it out. I just had to grind it out, like work more, work harder, and just figure. But I realized there's so much that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then I started getting coaching and learning from people who are where I wanted to be. And I'm like, wow, there's so much that I've been in the business for a long time. There's so much that I don't know, and I need to improve my knowledge. And that's led to a lot of improvements in business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Leslie, thank you so much
for
taking the time to come on the show today. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. How could someone reach you if they wanted to have a consultation or work with you?
Yeah, Woodnick Law. Look us up online. It's just woodnicklaw.com, and you'll get information there. Call the office, schedule a consult.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you again. I appreciate you taking the time. It's good to see you.
Thank you. You too.